everyone. Welcome to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for novices and masters alike. I am Dan. My co-host is, of course, Josh.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Are you doing well?
Yeah.
You okay?
We hope you're doing okay.
Got what you need? Getting by? It's a weird world, and it's not looking to change anytime soon.
Sometimes you don't get what you need, you get what you want. Yes.
Despite the wishes of people that it might, and we understand that. And we appreciate you taking some time to join us here in our little hour or so of madness.
Exactly. And like Fraser Crane, we are listening.
We are listening. Well, we're talking, and we hope you're listening.
We'll reverse that. So on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things lyrical, musical, structural, foundational, occasionally historical, because today is all about the Troubadour.
We'll be doing talking about talking.
Yes, and hopefully not singing, because nobody wants to hear us sing.
Well, nobody maybe wants to hear you sing.
I know for a fact I am flat and off key,
right,
so there's no way.
I am not. I did musical theater.
Good.
I will not subject people to that here right now.
We'll just start off with HMS Pinafore and kind of go from there.
I am the very model of a modern major general of information, vegetable, mental. I don't remember the lyrics well enough.
No, because it takes a lot of practice to get those right. So if you'd like to ask us any questions and provide us any feedback, you can, of course, email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
Yes, please.
But otherwise, you just want to dive right in?
Yeah. Let's get started.
Cool. I actually refreshed my memory on one of my favorite troubadours in movies by watching A Knight's Tale today before we recorded this. And Paul Bettany's character, Jeff Chaucer, is...
Well, Chaucer.
The only thing he's not doing is singing, but everything else he does is completely in line with a troubadour.
I mean,
so just
the guy,
give the man an instrument.
The guy only invented the novel in the English language.
So, yes, and at the end of the movie, I believe he says that the whole of human experience is on the artist's palate.
Yes, I would say that.
He was my favorite example of a troubadour, and I had to make sure I got it right before we recorded today. So I practiced that on purpose. But yes, he is, as I said, he's Chaucer. So come on.
Now, admittly, I have only read a very, very little bit of Chaucer. But yeah.
That's more than I have read.
Well, now, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Our old buddy Billy S. William Shakespeare.
Bill. Skip Shakespeare. Good old Skip Shakespeare, yeah.
Good old Willie Shakes. It's getting a little punchy.
Exactly. We're a little cooped up on the COVID quarantine thing. So hopefully everyone is as safe as they possibly can be. So let's get into troubadours.
I love troubadours.
Yes. Troubadours, the introduction, of course, says that they serve as entertainers, storytellers, actors, and songsmiths. And they also are the closest thing to a historian you can possibly come across in Barsave, which is, again, why I brought up Jeff Chaucer from the movie, because he is part historian, he's a novelist, he's a writer, he's a poet, and he's an orator to the greatest degree in that film. So it just brought that up. I've also recently come across a comic book run that I was reading called Astro City.
Astro City is great.
Fantastic. The latest run I finished up, the second arc of it, which came out from Vertigo Comics, just recently, issue number 37 had a character who was telling history about other musical heroes that had existed in this one city for generations past. And the music was always the hero was always tied to the type of music that was popular at the time. And so they had Jazz Baby, and they had the ragtime character, and so forth and so on. So I also thought that was a beautiful way to do it, because that was another example of a fantastically done troubadour, actually using song, actually using history, and telling stories along the way. So if you haven't read that series, listeners, please go pick it up and get a wonderful example of it, because the character is interspersed through the entire 52-issue run over and over. So it's. I read that recently and said, I got to use that one when we talk about troubadours as well. So I have those two examples for you. I don't have any otherwise offhand, but still.
Oh, I'm sure we'll come up with them.
We can probably come up with a couple. So yes, they are entertainers, storytellers, historians. They're the ones who tell the legends around Barsave.
Yeah.
More often than not. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't befriend a troubadour, play one.
Yeah. Troubadours are the epitome of the social discipline.
Yes. And so since we've made the comparison before, bards in D&D are one thing.
Yeah.
Troubadours in Earthdawn, I find a more robust discipline to play.
Well, there's a lot more structure to it, I think, and that kind of comes down to just overall game design. I mean,
Fair.
bards are a little bit kind of jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing, which are fine. I like bards too, and I like playing bards in most editions of Dungeons and Dragons when I played them. But no, the Troubadour and like parts and aspects of the whole setting and build-up of Earthdawn as the Age of Legend and the idea of stories and history and being inspired by the tales of the past and forging your own to be inspiration for the future and all that sort of thing, like plays very well into the Troubadour's wheelhouse and plays also into oral traditions and storytelling and song and all that sort of stuff. It's really, it's cool.
So, of course, their major attributes are charisma and perception.
Yep.
And perception just being that, base intelligence and knowledge and how you look at the world, because, of course, they're going to observe the world. And as we said, the entire human existence is open to the artist's palette. So, stuff like that. But otherwise, charisma, because they really have to sell the stories and make an impression, gather an audience. And so they have to be a very charismatic, I can say a leader, but a presence to that audience. So anyway, the Karma ritual, of course, didn't change a whole lot because we've discussed that before. But I love the fact that it has to end with the phrase, and there it ends, for such is the truth of the thing.
Yeah. The Karma rituals, as we've discussed with some of the others, haven't really changed. And that is an aspect of it where you get into the ritual of storytelling, because otherwise you are doing a performance of some sort, and the performance can vary from time to time that an individual troubadour is doing their ritual, but that there needs to be some kind of ritualistic aspect to it, in terms of being able to draw on and power their magic for the course of that. And it is the sort of the one thing that, the only drawback is that they need an audience, but otherwise they can perform that anywhere and do whatever seems appropriate for their particular style.
Yeah. I would love to see somebody make a troubadour as a stand-up comic. That would just be me. Mm-hmm. But then, there's a whole singing aspect of things, but... Some stand-up comics do sing. Otherwise, so artisan skills, body painting, embroidery, craftsmanship, that's, nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah,
there.
the interesting thing about Troubadour, because of their free talent, which we'll get to in a moment, their free talent can basically be their artisan skill. They would basically be using that to do whatever kind of performance or whatever that would typically be filled by an artisan skill from other disciplines. And so, what they would take as their secondary would be, basically what they would take as their sort of free artisan skill at character creation would be something that would be tied more to maybe a secondary interest or a background or something like that, because typically they would use entertainer as their talent that they would, perform whatever kind of requirements, if they were being challenged as far as demonstrating their artisan skill for a remote village or something along those lines.
So and then the half magic ability, they get tests for knowledge of legends, myths, folklore from lands and people. They also make half magic tests to identify instruments and performing arts of different areas.
Yep.
So, like I said, they're a musical historian, not unlike a radio DJ type thing. Like, yes, I've heard that legend, or I know that song, and so forth and so on. So they're not necessarily a walking jukebox, but
yeah, if you want to actually
name that song in 3 notes.
To kind of make another pop culture reference here, the Harper Hall of Pern books by Anne McCaffrey, the little subset of the greater Dragon Riders of Pern. But you've got the books there, especially Dragon Singer and Dragon Song, and I don't remember now which order they actually are.
Yeah.
But also like play very strongly into the idea the Harpers on Pern are a very like Troubadour like community in terms of being the performance aspects and the teaching songs and all of the stuff that goes along with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice deep dive.
Yeah.
Into a reference to go with. So something you can follow along with and maybe build off of the characters you read there. So let's get into the talents, really. And we've got as you said, the free talent at First Circle, Entertainer.
Yes. This basically any kind of performance-related artisan skill. Mm-hmm. Playing an instrument, singing, acting,
juggling, joke telling,
epic poetry,
yes,
ribald limericks, anything along those lines. Basically, it does not cover
little blue theater,
like sort of physical crafts the way that the craftsman talent does for weaponsmiths. But yeah, basically anything where the troubadour would be up and performing for an audience would fall under that. Because it makes sense that a troubadour would be able to do that and would progressively get better as they advance through the circles in their discipline.
Yeah. Or as George Carlin said, it's called attracting attention to yourself. And so, yes, it's entertaining somebody else in some particular way. So
yeah, in just about any way. It doesn't require the character to choose a specialty. Although I would certainly recommend as part of developing your character as a troubadour that you maybe decide what style or performance things they are stronger at and maybe more focused on. Mm-hmm. But I imagine that especially as they get into journeyman and even higher circles, that they would be expected to have a broad array of performance abilities because you never know.
Yeah. Totally. So otherwise, they get a durability of 5 because they're not a frontline fighter.
They're a specialist.
Yep. And so I think 5 is the lowest, is it not?
No, 5 is the middle. The lowest are the magicians with the 3.
That's right. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Been a while since we talked about a magician, but they're coming up again. And of course, they can at First Circle they can spend a point of karma on interaction tests.
Yeah.
So they get that one right off the bat.
Yep. Because as a social discipline, interaction tests and the interaction system are kind of the mechanics that they would be interacting with the most. And it would make sense that they could grease the wheels or boost their natural charisma with their magic. So that's absolutely along those lines. And I definitely think that if you're going to have a troubadour in your game, you really need to, at least to some extent, use the interaction test rules, the NPC, the Game Master character attitudes rules that are in the GM guide. Mm-hmm. In terms of that, you don't necessarily. We talked about this a number of episodes ago, where we talked about like role playing social interactions versus having mechanics for them and stuff. And this is a case where you at least want to allow some, because much of the troubadour's magic plays into that. You really want to at least, to some respect, use those frameworks and systems. Yeah,
I be familiar with them at the very least. I wouldn't say, hammer them home.
Yeah, I understand that different people's play styles and whatnot, to a greater or lesser extent, lean towards or away from using social mechanics, which is fine. But the troubadour was kind of built around the understanding that to at least some extent they would be being used.
Yes.
And so, keep that in mind. Otherwise, you may find a player that is frustrated that a lot of their tricks and powers don't come into play as much as they might otherwise like.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and if all else fails, if there's not a player character who's a troubadour, you should include him more often than every once in a while, as a character in a tavern you're going to, because they're always there. They're, like I said, part historians, part storytellers. They know lore, and occasionally you might have to seek out a troubadour to get a key knowledge on a magic item somewhere along the lines, because they might know it.
Yep.
So you should include a lot of troubadours as NPCs, at the very least.
Sure.
So otherwise, discipline, talents, to start First Circle, emotion song.
Mm-hmm. This is this is a talent that over a long period of time, over the course of a performance, allows the troubadour to try and sway the emotions of a crowd. This is the, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a song. I think any kind of, performance before a large audience would probably qualify. I don't remember whether it exactly says that in the rules text or not, but I would allow it without knacks or anything kind of special. But this is the St. Crispin's Day speech sort of thing, where you are giving a performance or something along those lines to drive the crowd, drive the audience to a particular in a particular direction. Do you want to? This is that sort of thing in terms of the rebel, the leader of the rebel faction rousing the crowd to go up and against the tyrannical king, or that sort of idea.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't find anything about it, whether you could not sing. So as far as I know, it's based upon an actual singing, but I skimmed just now, so no big deal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, first impression.
Yep. This is the one that a lot of troubadours will sort of fall to early on, and it's a great talent. It's the one that really helps grease the wheels of, we've arrived in a new place. We're meeting somebody for the first time that we're trying to get information from. The troubadour basically just walks in and is, generally speaking, uses a little bit of magic to make themselves more personable and likable and make people favorably inclined towards them. It's, even enemies and sort of violent people tend to still be a little bit more well disposed towards a troubadour if they've dropped some first impression mojo on them. It certainly buys a little bit of time to perhaps allow some more traditional interaction test stuff to do their thing.
Yeah, and most of the characters have some kind of social aspect, as we pointed out, except for the Beastmaster. This one is, 90% social?
Yeah.
75% social?
We're going to see a lot of that.
This is going to be hammering it home. So Heartening Laugh is
Heartening
next.
Laugh, yep. That's the one that is a sort of booster and helps resist magical fear, any kind of fear or intimidation effect, really, but especially magical ones. Yeah. Basically to help resist the nasty effect of the horror that has popped up and would otherwise make you quake in your boots.
Yeah.
Or, battle shouts or other similar, magic that's trying to strike fear, and the troubadour can be there laughing it off. Yeah,
he's your rallying cry. Even though it's called a Heartening Laugh, same thing. But yeah, he's there to rally your spirits, your emotions, and get you back, and get you to shake that stuff off. But then again, as we said, historian, because here comes item history.
Yes. Item history, probably one of the more important talents in the game. Certainly in the Troubadour kit. I mean, Weaponsmith gets it as well as an option, I think. One or two other disciplines have it as an option, but as a discipline talent for the Troubadour, this is basically where they look at old stuff and through magic and study. It takes time, but they basically learn the questions you need to answer in order to unlock the magical power of thread items.
Yeah. So if you don't know Weaponsmith, know a Troubadour.
Yep.
And then, of course, they get thread weaving, which is, of course, story weaving. Yes. But yeah, first circle, I can't see anything to replace there because, again, this is a social character. So on a second circle, they get a +1 to their social defense, as they should.
Yep.
But then, of course, they get etiquette.
Knowing how to behave in a wide variety of situations. That's obviously something that would come naturally to a troubadour, to be able to pick up the appropriate behaviors for where they are and fit in, whether it is in a roadside tavern in Carafod or the halls of power in Thrall or anything in between. Again, the ability to know how to behave.
And what to watch out for if you happen to be walking into Kratos.
Yep.
Yeah, Kratos is a whole different city than, Troubadour. So it's,
right.
Yeah, know where to behave, how to behave and where you are. So, yeah, read the room, which is entirely what etiquette is kind of about. Third circle, they get the extra karma point on any test to gain or recall information. So, because
including
they are
knowledge
information
tests.
gatherers. Yes, because as the example from A Knight's Tale, he runs off to gather information to come back and tell everybody else in the party. So he is a master with words, and he's going to use that to pry information from other people. So that's that.
Yep.
But then he gets empathic sense.
To understand and sense how people are feeling, both their allies as well as other folks that are around them. Again, very, very useful thing to have, especially if you are maybe going to lead that into an emotion song where you know what people are feeling and maybe how to turn that around. It's a good way of getting insight into people that you might be negotiating with. You know, it's not a lie detector, but it can certainly be very handy when you get into negotiations and social interactions and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Between the etiquette and empathic sense, I wouldn't see anything to replace those with as far as a core tier set of talents to be using. So we'll get to the options in a sec. But fourth circle, they get the +1 to mystic defense. Because again, they're not fighters. So just in case any charm type spells or influencing type spells are cast near them or on them. But then they get the fourth circle discipline talent of research. Basically they know how to find information. This is one that if you are going to be playing more of a traditional skald or bard or less bookish troubadour, you might be able to swap out for another, for one of the options that's available there that might be a little bit more appropriate, because research really does involve, okay, I'm going to go and spend time in the library looking up information. And if you're more of the oral tradition type, then that might not be particularly well suited, but it is really handy, especially once you had item history and learn some of the questions you need to ask. Research can certainly help you at least point in the right direction of where to find the answers. Yeah. So I'd like all of those as the basis from which to start. So let's get to the options, which are lengthy, but no more than anybody else's. Beginning with avoid blow, only because it's alphabetical. But
you said
always good to have.
Always good to have. You did say that troubadours are not fighters, and that is certainly the case, that they don't have any real combat talents as discipline as required talents. But it is not unusual for troubadours kind of playing a little bit into the bard archetype to be able to fight, even if it's not super well. They certainly might be able to wield a weapon, and avoid blow certainly comes in handy, even if you're not a particularly strong fighter, in terms of protecting yourself from any kind of offensive actions against you. And, if for some reason your performance is not going well, it's good for dodging tomatoes and other rotten vegetables being thrown at you.
Totally. And that's a good story as well to work in every once in a while. And then, of course, the other social talents, conversation.
They've got to have access to it, and that might be one to swap in for research if you're looking at trading out the bookish for the more performance type.
I was just going to ask that question.
Yeah, it's another.
Where would you trade that?
Again, talking about the situation where there are only so many discipline slots, and there are maybe more talents that we would want to put in there. Choices have got to be made, but conversation as a social talent, if a troubadour doesn't have it, something's wrong.
Fair. I can get along with that. And then haggle. Again, it's more of a conversation bargaining talent.
Yeah, it's another sort of social charisma-based talent, but not one that is necessarily quite as important for a troubadour. I think seeing that one in the option is a lot more appropriate than it might be. But again, it's still a good skill to have if you've got a wandering minstrel. How are they going to work out the rates for their performance, or maybe negotiate to perform in exchange for room and or board at wherever they happen to be staying?
Yes. Or if they're invited to perform for some kind of a noble along the way. What kind of rate are they going to charge? So haggle that one, see if they can get more money.
Sure.
An impressive display, which I know has been renamed from impressive performance, I think.
Impressive display, I think actually it used to be... I don't remember what the original name of the talent was. I think it was, I want to say that it was like called shot, which gives like the called shot talent was like the name of it was kind of misleading in terms of what it did. But basically the idea of impressive display is that it allows the person using it to substitute, to basically do something as a performance, as a way of like modifying somebody's attitude towards you. The stereotypical kind of idea of that is the sword master who cuts the buttons off of somebody's jacket. They're not intending to do damage or actually hurt anybody with it, but they are trying to impress or show off in some manner.
Mm-hmm. So instead of, so if you're a singer, and I'm going to go along with a pop culture reference, if you're a singer, this is I'm going to jump off the drum riser and do the splits in the air and then begin singing versus just standing at the microphone and just belting.
Well, I don't even know that I would necessarily go that far, because the jumping off the drum riser thing probably would fall under entertainer as well.
Fair.
Impressive display basically allows you to do a interaction test of making an impression using something other than just straight charisma, I think.
Okay.
Something along those lines. Read the rules for the talent, and it kind of talks about what you can do with it.
Yeah.
It's not, for someone who might be a more martially inclined troubadour, who will be doing maybe a little bit more combat, might be showing off with that in terms of talent.
Yeah. So this is more, the display can be of any kind as long as the target character observes it. So that's it. Yeah, like you said, it's.
I think it basically allows them to substitute charisma for whatever the normal attribute is for the talent they use.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the adept activates this talent, then uses the appropriate talent or skill for his chosen display instead of its normal use. The test result is compared to the target's social defense. So no matter what they're doing.
Okay. So they use
against the target's social defense.
Right. So okay. Right. So basically, like a troubadour, if for some reason was using melee weapons, they would basically target melee weapons or target social defense with melee weapons, and the result would be based on that.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So that just changes up how what they're doing is perceived by the onlooker.
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay, I got that. We're good. And I like that one in there. So impressive display, again, I wouldn't say it's critical.
Certainly can come in handy depending on how you are building and developing your troubadour.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I wouldn't call it a discipline talent, but I like the fact that it's an option because it totally fits with what a troubadour would and should be able to do. Mm-hmm. And then on to melee weapons.
Yes, they would. Again, being able to fight is probably not a bad thing if you're going to be playing an adventure type troubadour.
Yeah.
It's not strictly required in terms of the discipline talent thing. It's certainly possible that you could decide to pick up melee weapons as a skill and kind of do your fighting that way. You miss out on the ability to spend karma on it. It's a little bit more expensive and a little bit slower to advance, but you might find that there are other things that you want to have instead.
Yeah. A friend of mine made...
being able to... You were saying, go ahead. No.
A friend of mine made an obsidian troubadour, and what he did is he took melee weapons, and the hilt of his sword, the handle of his sword, is actually a flute built in. So it's obviously made of steel, but it's one of those things where he just turns the sword upside down and plays the flute while he's walking around, but he still has it's in his sword.
Cool.
So that's his pattern. That's his item he's going with. And he wrote that up as a huge long adventure I posted online many years ago. So if you want, I can find that somewhere. Anyway, then on to read and write language.
Yeah, seems to be pretty straightforward. I mean, if you're going to be covering old knowledge and legends and research and stuff like that, the magical ability to quickly learn to read ancient texts can come in very handy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're the teller of tales, this is how you learn them faster.
Yep, and complements very nicely the next option, which is speak language, which is basically the same thing, but just for spoken stuff.
What? How'd that get there? No, just kidding. But no, I agree. Read and write and then speak language both should be there as options without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, they're ones that almost, if there were slots available, speak language substituting for research as the fourth circle discipline talent is another option if you're looking for less of a bookish sort.
Yeah, fair. I would totally allow that.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And then on to taunt.
Yep. It's a social attack. It is one that is a lot more structured in terms of what it does rules wise, basically by providing penalties to people that you are targeting with it, making them flustered or angry or whatever, and penalizing them as a result.
And as we've said before with magicians, it's the escalating arms race between heartening laugh and taunt.
Yes.
I can taunt you and I can resist what you're giving to me. So yeah. It just the escalating arms race. And then, of course, throwing weapons as an option versus melee weapons.
Right.
So,
throwing weapons, if I mean, it makes sense. Missile weapons versus throwing weapons, we had talked a lot about with some of the other disciplines where missile weapons, generally speaking, tends to be a little bit of a better option simply because of the greater range and whatnot. But with the Troubadour, throwing weapons actually makes a lot of sense because you have the idea of perhaps a blade juggler or something along those lines. And having throwing weapons kind of to go along with that as an idea, you know, it makes a lot more sense just kind of thematically in terms of why they might have that over, you know, they're not going to be shooting things with a bow. They would have throwing axes or, you know, in the same way that you would juggle knives or
throwing daggers,
or bowling pins or whatever.
Yeah. And because their durability is only a 5, they may not want to get up close.
Right. I mean, the drawback being that throwing weapons does tend to require you to be a little bit closer than you would with a missile weapon.
Yes.
But just thematically, it fits a lot better in terms of what they would potentially be doing.
Yeah. They're used to projecting at least voice out to a crowd. And so same thing with the throwing weapons is at least that idea of there's a space between me and the person.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, you know, spend a little bit of money, get yourself some forged throwing daggers or something along those lines, and just make sure you recover them after the fight.
Totally. And then lastly, for the options, winning smile.
It's another social, manipulative, like change an NPC's attitude towards you sort of thing.
Yeah, I've always loved the picture in the previous editions of Winning Smile. This troll, this
troll with the
big bling on his front tooth. It was always one of my favorite pictures to look at every time I flip through the book. And yeah, of course, it targets social defense, add +2 per any interaction tests. Yeah, it usually works against the same race, but still, it's
I mean, basically, what you kind of do is if you're really building like the social monster Troubadour, you open up with first impression to get the target's attitude towards you as high as possible. Then you use Winning Smile to give you bonuses to the actual interaction test where you're trying to persuade them to do stuff for you. And so like the combination of those two together, you know, is like that's a really punch. It's a really, really nice sort of 1-2 punch. And then you can, you know, throw karma like crazy around on it all as well. So
exactly. So take that and run. So really, I think first 4 circles is you've got a solid making to your Troubadour, your emotion song, your etiquette, your empathic sense, your research. Yeah, you've got a very well-rounded,
you know, the
social and historical type looking character who's got the legends and the know-how.
Yeah,
for
I mean, the options that you pick up, you sort of look at, are you going to have a little bit of combat ability where you might want to take like melee weapons and avoid blow, maybe taunt as well, because that's really handy in a combat situation. Are you going to be going with one that's a bit more scholarly where you'd be looking at like read and write language, you know, speak language, maybe, you know, something like that? Or are you going to go like the true social monster and pick up like conversation and Winning Smile and speak language probably would be handy in there, you know? So there's depending on exactly what your focus might be, you know, kind of allow you to take some options there.
Totally. And if the game you're in, first and second circle kind of changes pace a little bit or changes direction a little bit, you've got the options to kind of flesh out what you might need to do as far as maybe 1 or 2 players dropped out. Oh, I need to pick up something to help with the fighting. Yeah. You know, you've got the options there. So they're not required, but they are options. So on to 5th circle, they get their first otherwise talent, one last word.
It's a special ability. Basically, they can take strain to add a karma die after the fact to a failed social test. So if they don't do as well as if they failed on a haggle roll or on any kind of interaction test, you know, or anything along those lines, they can spend 2 strain and add a karma die after the fact. They can only do it once, but it's, you know, there aren't a lot of opportunities for karma to be added after the fact if you failed. The Troubadours get that for social stuff.
I can just imagine the character that I would be playing if I'd failed that. Every time I would roll that karma die, adding the phrase, and one more thing.
And another thing.
I can just see that happening. There's a book I've got that actually has phrases in other languages that don't translate to English. And one of those phrases, I don't remember what the word is, translates to, these are stairwell words. As in, didn't have an answer for you until the door closed. I walked down the stairwell and said, there's my answer.
Yeah, the actual phrase you're thinking of, it's a French phrase. It's called l'esprit de l'escalier, which literally
There you
means
go.
the spirit of the staircase. It's basically
Yes.
the idea of, oh, you come up with it after the fact. Oh, I should have said.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So, welcome to Troubadours.
Welcome to
who
Troubadours.
Want to have the last word. So, yes, that's the example I was trying to think of.
Yep.
So they get that at fifth circle, which again, as we've talked about, you kind of rise first, second, third really quickly. Fourth, you hang around in for a little while. When you get to fifth, it's not that long.
You know,
So
as
get to fifth pretty easily.
if the Troubadours needed any more help to be a social monster, they now, we can do a little bit of mojo after the fact to make it even better.
Exactly. Welcome to my friend over here, Loquacious Jones, and we're all set. Also at fifth circle, to get the other karma, which is once per round, the adept may spend a karma point to add to another character's test by offering encouragement.
Yes.
So, yeah, you get to add it. Again, it's kind of like one last word for what he said.
Right.
Or she said.
This doesn't allow them to spend the karma point after the fact, but basically allows the troubadour to basically chip one of their karma points in as appropriate for somebody else's attempt. Like if you're in it, maybe like a duel situation where the swordmaster is going up against a tougher opponent, the troubadour can give some encouraging words and put a little bit of extra pep in his step, throwing an extra karma die into that.
Mm-hmm. Again, go back to A Knight's Tale. Plenty of that in the movie. Fresh in my mind. Otherwise, which again falls in line with the discipline talent to inspire others.
Yes. Inspire others is a little bit broader. This is really the St. Crispin's Day
speech making.
Yeah, the St. Crispin's Day speech making. Basically you use it against a group. All affected characters get bonuses to social defense and to their tests for a few rounds. It's a really it does take the adepts the troubadour's action in the round. But this is basically the encourage my group. This is this is,
I am to misbehave from Serenity.
Yeah. In a situation where you're looking to provide a little bit of extra bonus.
Yeah. So again, right at the Troubadour's alley. This is their social monster. I will get you to do what I want you to do. I will convince you and make it your idea. Sixth circle, they of course get the +2 to social defense.
Yep.
So a total of +2, not cumulative. And again, lasting impression. So they have first impression and now lasting impression.
Yes, this is when the troubadour has initially met them and is going to leave, but maybe coming back later.
Yeah.
Basically leaves them with a good impression so that when he comes back, he has bonuses on future interaction tests with them. Mm-hmm. Coming back to
always leave them wanting a little more.
Yes.
But that's how troubadours play that.
It is limited in that it's not just a sort of I'll be right back. This is more of I'll be back. I'll be back in a few days, and kind of laying the groundwork for a little bit more persuasion and manipulation down the road. Yeah.
So it's like I said, first impression, lasting impression. It's just one of those. I want you to always remember who I am and that our relationship is favorable toward me. So, yes. And then seventh circle, resist taunt.
This is a no-brainer. If you're going to, this is the troubadour's social magic is so ingrained and advanced at this point that they have the ability to magically resist anything that is targeting their social defense. That includes magical abilities like taunt. It's not necessarily great against certain kinds of magical fear because those typically target mystic defense, but that's what you've got, heartening laugh for.
Exactly.
But this is basically, the ability to
not be affected by what everybody else is telling you. To
keep your cool under pressure, to not rise to the occasion if you're getting heckled or something along those lines.
Totally. And then an eighth circle, Slough Blame, which I have always loved.
It's a great name. I
love that one.
It's a great talent name. This is the one basically that allows the troubadour to divert suspicion from one person to another. If if they've got a thief with them that got caught with their hand in somebody's pocket, this is what you break out in order to try and
misdirect,
smooth things over or misdirect things enough to
find a different scapegoat for that.
Yes.
that thing. No, I didn't even pickpocket you. That little boy over there did. He's running. See how fast he's running away from the scene of the crime? So there's your slough blame. And of course, they get that extra bonus to their social defense, ending up with a total of 3 by the time they get to 8th circle.
Yep.
So, yeah, they are, as you said, the social monster. Don't put them in the front line of the fight because they are squishy. But, anybody can be a troubadour. That's the good news. But yeah, slough blame is just awesome. Anyway, on to the options. This is going to be a very fast episode, I think, today.
That's fine.
Yeah. Air speaking, which I always have to look up because I never remember what it actually
Air speaking
does.
basically allows the person using it to silently communicate with other people at a distance.
Nice.
Or to be heard at a distance. Like, again, kind of like troubadours would be good at projecting their voices and stuff, but sometimes you want to convey information to someone specifically, or maybe you want to be heard in a otherwise loud environment. Air speaking is the way that would happen.
Yeah. It's not quite ventriloquist dummy, but something along those lines. And then blade juggle, of course, as an option, not discipline talent.
Right. Blade juggle is a defensive sort of talent. Basically, in the course of juggling knives, axes, daggers, small swords, whatever, you basically are making a test and get a bonus to their physical defense based on how much stuff they are juggling. And if an attack doesn't hit them because of that increased physical defense, then they, don't get hit, but have the ability to basically make a counterattack with that, similar to how basically
Riposte.
they, like one of the, they basically make a test as an attack test and use a weapon, basically like a thrown weapon. And unfortunately that weapon, once used as a counterattack, is now kind of removed from the whole thing. But basically it's kind of a complex talent, and there's a really good example in the test
In
there.
the talent description?
Yeah. In the talent description, it kind of shows how it all works.
But it's also one of those where the player and the game master get to have a lot of fun with that in describing a scene, describing what he's juggling, how that whole thing plays out. And they can be very cinematic with the description and really give off kind of that impressive display, not only for the rest of the party, but all onlookers as well. This is just, like I said, that's impressive on its own, right? Just for the blade juggle. So it's a neat little talent to have in there. Good option. Diplomacy.
It's another social talent. I mean, if it's a social talent, it shows up somewhere in their list. It's not something that is necessarily in their like core abilities. I imagine that troubadours in general would probably make decent diplomats or negotiators, and certainly those who tend to focus on that would probably have the talent. But again, it's a social ability. Troubadour should probably have access to it in some sense.
Agreed. Moving on to disguise self.
Yep. This is pretty self-explanatory.
Kind of
yeah, I mean, it allows, if you're going to be going with a little bit more of a, like when you start combining things like throwing weapons and some of the other stuff with, like a secondary discipline, if somebody's going to multidiscipline into thief, troubadour, that's a little bit of an interesting combination. But disguise self, also useful in performances. Maybe if you're going to if you want to look like a particular individual, it's got both performative and covert ways of handling it. Troubadours can actually make really effective spies and agents, because they are kind of so well regarded and can and it is expected that they will travel around.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
I agree with that.
So, disguise self could be handy in that kind of attitude.
Yeah, I was thinking David Bowie becoming Ziggy Stardust on stage, but that was just my first thought. Disguise who I actually look like, because I'm going to perform as somebody else for a while. And then, of course, because it's social, engaging banter.
Engaging banter is less of a social talent, but a socially directed talent that allows the troubadour to distract somebody. Like, this is the thief needs to sneak in. I'm going to talk to the town guard. I'm going to talk to the guard and distract the guard and keep their attention on me while the thief or somebody else tries to sneak past behind them.
Yes, as in every movie that's ever been used.
Right.
So Agreed. And this is totally for the Troubadour to do. Graceful exit to go along with the lasting impression.
Well, graceful exit is not a no. Graceful exit is a fight has broken out. I'm so sorry. I must go. And basically allows the Troubadour to gallantly withdraw with or without their allies. It does have the ability to spread to your friends if you want, but basically does give the Troubadour the ability to withdraw or escape from a conflict without, basically buying them a few moments of time. And if it doesn't work, then things don't go well.
As rightfully, and it's part of the storytelling aspect of the Troubadour. So if the graceful exit fails, there's a story wrinkle that the games master gets to use and let that play out as it goes. So they get to help tell the story that way. And hypnotize.
Hypnotize, this similar to like disguise self and another optional talent that we'll be getting to in another moment. Yeah. The Troubadour does get a little bit of some illusionist stuff in with them, which kind of fits along with their performance thing. Yeah. Hypnotize, kind of using it's sort of a socially related thing, using words to persuade or to plant suggestions in the target, and to do stuff like that. So certainly, for again, like maybe more nefarious or covert style Troubadours who might be acting as a spy or agent or something like that can be really handy for them to have that in their toolkit.
Yeah, because they don't really have seduce, but hypnotize works quite well.
Now.
Gotta have some fun. So leadership, and going back to A Knight's Tale again, because I watched it today on purpose, that character took a leadership role over everybody else in their group about directing this, knowing what they should do here, and knowing what not to do in this case as well. Again, it's leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a social talent. Troubadours, I don't think necessarily automatically come to mind when you're thinking about somebody that would be taking a leadership role. Quite frequently, that would fall to other types, but it is absolutely something with their social abilities would be appropriate, especially if you're looking at one who is going to be going in a slightly more martial direction.
Yeah, we covered air sailors and cavalrymen would automatically be my go-tos to take the leadership role because of the teamwork aspect of the air sailor and warrior as well. Just to say, we're going to do this in battle next, or this is our game plan here. Troubadour wouldn't immediately come to mind, which I think would make an interesting, or at least a very well-rounded idea for a character to be a Troubadour and take the leadership aspect of the party that they're in. I think that would create a wonderful storytelling options there. Lionheart is next.
It's another anti-fear ability, one that is kind of generally useful, and again to kind of go along with the keeping spirits up and that sort of thing. It's not really one that allows you to boost or help your allies, but having the ability to resist those kind of effects for a social character makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And the last one, which we said kind of goes along with disguise self and hypnotize, is mimic voice.
Yep, absolutely something that a performer or actor or singer or whatever would have as part of their magical toolkit, the ability to really kind of like put on the voice of others in a performance or something along those lines. But again, comes in handy if you're going to be going with a sort of sneaky covert agent kind of spy troubadour.
Yeah.
As you kind of put on a disguised self and, mimic voice to resemble the captain of the guard, to make it a little bit easier to sneak through the lines or, something like that. Absolutely. If you're going to go that round.
Yeah. So I find troubadours to be very well-rounded and a lot of places to explore and really create something wholly unique from any other troubadour you've probably ever seen, because they do have so many social options and a couple of combat options and a couple of spy options. So they have, depending on the options you take, they do have the ability to fight. But it is absolutely, as it should be clear from the list that we went through, you can take all of the combat related talents as options and still have a couple of slots left over. They really don't have a lot of that. I think 3. It's avoid blow, melee weapons,
avoid blow, melee weapons, throwing weapons, blade juggle, kind of.
Maybe, yeah.
Graceful exit is sort of combat related, but just in general, they are not fighters. You can take options to have them be able to sort of hold their own in combat, but if you need to understand as a troubadour, and I think a game master, if you have a troubadour in your group, you need to provide opportunities for their particular focus to come into play.
Yeah.
And again, like we said sort of back at the beginning, at least understanding and providing the opportunity for Game Master character attitudes and interaction tests and favors and all of the pieces of that sort of subsystem to come into play from a dice rolling point of view. Again, I completely understand the desire to, maybe try and minimize the social mechanics of things, but if you haven't heard our discussion on that, go back and find that old episode. I think it was in response to an email question that somebody had about that. And we went on at some length.
Most of the email episodes are the even numbers, like 12, 14, 16, 18.
Well, they all say, check the show notes. They all say, typically say email as part of the episode name, and then just check the show notes, and it will say, because the emails would typically be at the beginning of the episode, just check those first few show notes and see where that shows up. But if you've got a troubadour, you need to be looking at interacting with people. I mean, you've got plenty of opportunities to do so, but interactions, the research and knowledge aspect that will come into play with regards to stuff like that, is another angle. So that's all really good stuff. And
on the 4th edition Game Master screen, the interaction success table is there. So it's not like we were ever ignoring the contribution that troubadours make to the setting.
Right.
Because again, if you don't have one as a PC, you need to have a couple as NPCs, because there's always one traveling, there's always one in a tavern somewhere. So they need to be a larger part of the general setting of your bar save, or if you're taking them off the map, that too.
Yeah, I mean, especially if your particular group makeup does not have a troubadour or a weaponsmith, or have one of the other disciplines that get access to it as an option to take item history as a talent, then at some point, player characters, if they're, when they're looking into their thread items, their magic items that they recover, are going to want to deal with a troubadour. Probably deal with a troubadour in some sense or another. Yeah.
I always likened, and if anybody approached me and wanted to play a troubadour, I'd say, well, let's say you're musically based, because we're going to start there, because of a motion song. What instrument do you want to play? I'll give you the instrument for free. I had one play with a drum. I had one play with a guitar. And, of course, my friend who played one with the flute on his sword handle. So I always say, okay, great, and let's since it's slightly quasi-medieval times, I always kind of let's go with folk music first, nothing with rap or heavy metal or anything like that. A simple instrument to play along and make a tune out of, or, a lute or a lyre. So I always kind of point them in the direction of, let's find some folk singers you can kind of base things on. So if you do want to come up with a song, take the melody of this, add some of your own lyrics, change them up if you want to, I don't care. But I can immediately think of 4 right off the bat that I would lead anybody towards as far as that's concerned: Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, and Joan Baez.
Yeah. Opti does that with Scratch in the Legends of Earthdawn game. He basically takes he does Filk, basically.
Yes, absolutely. It's an appropriate
place
to use that. It is. I've become a fan of Firefly and Serenity Filk songs over the past few years, because they're fun. That's all there is to it. They're fun because you have an inside joke. You know what they're singing about. Not a lot of people do, but there you are. So it's a fun thing to have. So yeah, if I would have to sit down for a longer time and imagine the troubadour that I would make. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th edition rules, it doesn't matter. I've not considered it, but I've always had one in the background, performing, getting the coins from the characters, singing their songs, offering legends, and occasionally helping them out with an item history here or there. So I've always had a troubadour hanging around in my kit to bring out if somebody needed something.
I love the troubadour. anybody who knows me should not be surprised by that.
What, musical theater? No.
Yeah, musical theater background and performance and all the rest of that. It is a fairly significant part of my personality. And if I were I think when I was sort of statting up my self-insert in Earthdawn at one point, he was made up as a Tiskrang troubadour.
Rightfully so, because we've gushed about Tiskrang and our love of them. So I could imagine no other race for you to play a troubadour in any way, shape, or form.
Right. So yeah, I think we'll close the curtain on this one.
Yes, exactly. Pun intended.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
don't need the hook to drag us off stage. We know when our you can
throw the tomatoes in email, please.
Yes,
and we'll go from there.
And if you want to send us an email, that address, as always, edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
So until next time, please go out and sing your own legend.
Yes.